Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is our weekly pulse check, taking a look at the hot news in automation and AI. Michael, we've got a full slate for today.
I'll say.
I'm going to really put you to the test. So let's jump in with our first article. It comes from Hyperdimensional. And the title of it is "The EU AI Act is Coming to America." So last week in Paris, they had an AI Action Summit, and the US Vice President J.D. Vance was there, and he had quite a bit to say. He actually chastised the European Union for moving too quickly with preemptive regulations around AI, and basically said, we're not going to do the same in the US. However, in the background, it appears that several US states are making their own regulatory changes around this that look strikingly similar to what's happening in Europe. So what's your take, Michael?
Well, there's a lot of stuff happening, and it's over a dozen states within the US that have done this. And the first take on that is, if you don't have a unified approach to this, I'm not sure how any company is going to be able to comply with laws from one state, which may differ from another state, which differs from the EU. We're going to have a fractured viewpoint on this, especially if the US as a whole does not approach it in its kind of totality.
That's
so
a
I think
great
that's
point.
My first thing on this is like, holy cow, this is going to be very difficult for the average company to be able to comply with this, which then opens up a whole set of other issues then from a legal perspective, where now you have to have the legal teams involved to make sure that all the states' rulings and laws are followed for those things. And what happens if you have one state that has a very restrictive laws compared to others? Which one rules? Do they do like we did with the California emissions, where, hey, California is really, really restrictive, therefore all of the United States will just follow that rule because it's so much more restrictive than the lesser restrictive rules that are in other states. It's going to be a mess, quite honestly. And I think until this gets resolved, there may be a lot of pushback. And not that I encourage regulation, because I do think it could stifle things, which we've seen in the EU. But I also believe there is an element of maybe basic safety or basic governance that has to come into play to support the broader protection of any country's citizens from the potential harm that comes from just mass harvesting of data. Right. So, I guess there's going to be a lot that's going to come out of this. There's a lot in this article talking about, very specific ethnic groups that could potentially be harmed by this, and the discrimination by those algorithms going through that. Again, this is a very sensitive issue that I'm not sure we're going to get through as a society, not just us in this podcast, but as a society, to get through the discussions and debates about what's fair and how to manage that in a way that will not stifle innovation.
Right.
So this is sticky. I mean, it just is. So I do believe we're going to have regulations associated with this. I'm worried that we're going to have a fracturing of how these laws are going to be applied. So that's my interpretation of this particular article.
I think that's very reasonable. The author points out that most of the bills, although they differ in penalties and language and what have you, most of them fall into that category of, as you pointed out, algorithmic discrimination. But it also gives some examples, like the state of Colorado, that they don't even know how to implement it. They're passing laws around it that they are that confuse themselves. And this is a pretty gloom and doom article. I think the very end of it, the author says he predicts within a year or two, artificial intelligence will be the most heavily regulated general purpose digital technology in American history.
Mhm.
So, and this is in the Trump era, which purports to be very regulation light. So we'll see if Trump and the presidential administration does anything to lessen the load at the state level. But so far, he's been pretty hands off as it relates to what the states want to do. So we'll see. When it touches AI, maybe that will prompt him to be a little bit different.
Well, I think this is also one of those things that could lead itself to lawsuits on very specific items. And then having those lawsuits that are brought to trial, I can't imagine an average juror being able to decipher the inner workings of the way these data sets are harvested and how the data is managed. So this, like I said, this is going to be really sticky, and it's not going to be resolved anytime soon.
Yeah, no chance. Okay, let's move on to our second article that comes from TechCrunch, and it's titled OpenAI Cancels its O3 AI model in favor of a unified next-gen release. So OpenAI has effectively canceled the release of O3, which was slated to be their next major AI model, in favor of something that Sam Altman is calling a simplified product offering. So break it all down for us, Michael.
I'll try. So the basics are that as you go through any models within OpenAI, selecting particular models for your output, provide, various cost models, cost breakdowns, and output results that you can choose from to make your decisions on or get your output that you're looking for when you type in your prompt. The challenge you have is because there are so many, where do you start from? Which one is the right one from OpenAI? Which one do you believe is going to give you the best output without breaking the bank? Because as you go into the more recent models, you're likely going to have a lot more issues with pricing and cost concerns than you would if maybe you used one of the open source models from a different provider, or one of the earlier models in the OpenAI stable. So again, I can understand where he's coming from, trying to build a standardized thing. I go to OpenAI and I, supply the prompt I have. Perhaps there's going to be some premium model which will allow you to identify something specific within your prompt, which is hey, this looks like it may require additional reasoning or thought processes. Do you want me to think harder on this? And maybe that gives you the option versus, just tossing it in and hoping that whatever model is run behind the scenes is the one that you're really happy with. So anyway, I think that's a bigger question to understand. Yeah, I agree. I agree with simplifying. Absolutely. Because if you have too many models, people are going to go, I have no idea which one to choose. Yeah. And I would see the one with the bigger number must be better. So I want the GPT 4.5. I want GPT 5. I want GPT 6. Because those must be the best ones. But when in fact your answer could be as easily or as accurately provided to you by one of the earlier models, which could be less expensive to operate. So don't know how they're going to manage that inside of OpenAI, but I assume there's going to be some kind of model that will eventually give you the ability to choose something more sophisticated.
Altman says in the article that they hate the model picker in ChatGPT, so they're hoping to get rid of that. So you don't have to decide which model you want to use. He
I
also,
did you like when he called about it? He
Yeah,
says like we hate as much as you do, and we want to return to magic unified intelligence.
that's
Yeah,
right.
that's a good one.
That's right. Altman also said that their company's latest model is going to be the last one that uses non-chain of thought processing. We talked about this on a prior podcast, that chain of thought, which is where the models tend to fact check themselves and take a little bit longer before returning a result so that it can be more accurate. So a little bit more latent, but more accurate as a result. So I guess that is going to become the standard, starting with the next one. But too bad for those that worked on O3, all that, late nights, working on weekends. They're not going to have anything to show for it.
Right.
All right. Our next article is also from TechCrunch. It's about the other LLM, one of the others.
Which other? Many others.
One of the big ones. Well, maybe the next big one that's going to take precedence here. Elon Musk's xAI releases its latest flagship model, Grok 3. So Grok 3, which has been in development for several months, was supposed to be released last year, but it missed that deadline. Now it's out there. What does this article tell us about Grok 3 that caught your attention, Michael?
A couple different things. One is its capabilities as it's benchmarked against other large language models that are out there, from Google, from DeepSeek, from OpenAI and whatnot. And they're going back to the whole reasoning concept. So Grok 3 does have that chain of thought reasoning process within it, which is interesting. I think after folks saw the output from DeepSeek, they really started appreciating the viewpoint of maybe some more transparency into how that black box is working. But where I thought was most interesting is you mentioned 2024 was where their target was releasing Grok 3, but as part of their implementation, they had to build a whole new data center, and not just any data center. They had to put 200,000 GPUs to work within this data center. And all these GPUs are liquid cooled and require a boatload of energy. So they were able to do that in just a few months, put this thing together and actually have it starting to be trained. So to be able to go from a warehouse to a liquid cooled data center with 200,000 GPUs actively training your latest AI model is pretty darn impressive. So out of this article, to me, that is honestly the most impressive thing, beyond the fact that the model itself produces some pretty substantial returns on your inquiries. But I think the most ingenious part of it is the way that they were able to put this together with a team to create this in such a short period of time. It does remind me a lot of sort of like the skunkworks approach to SpaceX and some of the stuff with Tesla, where they're breaking new ground and doing it quickly by unleashing the creativity of people inside these organizations to do that. So technology aside, amazing feat by a bunch of really, really talented people. And then, and again, an amazing feat by the LLM itself and the training and the outputs that they're getting. So all around pretty cool stuff here. I think we're going to see a lot more of this too, as we start looking at these models as they're advancing. There's been this school of thought that either you throw a lot of hardware at something and like this and train something, cutting edge, or you take the DeepSeek approach, which is to borrow from some of other models and their output and their training to create something slightly different in a different implementation with a much lesser cost. So it'll be interesting to see how these things pan out. But the reality is that there's a lot of technology, like the hardware being thrown at this stuff to be able to create these models that we are now taking for granted.
Yeah. And on the data side, I thought it was interesting. It said that Grok used a lot of court cases in the expanded training set. So maybe they're trying to win over the legal firms as customers. I thought that was interesting. And also, Elon, when he announced Grok 2 years ago, said that it was going to be an edgy, unfiltered, and anti-woke model. And what all that translates to is, if you want a model that will curse at you, you finally got one, Michael. I know you've been waiting for one.
Yeah, that's top of my list, of course. Yep.
That's just what we need, a cursing LLM.
Another thing that kind of popped in my mind as you're talking about the training data that are used. So by training Grok 3 on a mountain of legal cases and laws, perhaps that will allow Elon and his efforts within his other efforts, I should say, within the government that he's been working on to skirt by some potential legal things, to create loopholes or open loopholes that no one really saw what were there. So I'm guessing there's some ulterior motives in the data set they used. Not only is it public data, but I think there's some ulterior motives that are being pursued there.
Interesting thought, no doubt. All right, our next article is from Gizmodo, and this is about yet a third LLM that we'll talk about today. DeepSeek gets an F in safety from researchers. So researchers at Cisco, they tasked Chinese AI firm DeepSeek's open source model with fending off 50 separate attacks that were designed to get the LLM to engage in what is considered harmful behavior. So how did that go, Michael?
Not well. So if we take your viewpoint on whether Grok is going to be swearing at us, now it can swear at us while it tells us how to commit crimes, build illegal activities, and cause harm. So the reality is that while Cisco is testing these models out and validating the output, none of the models did super well on it. I mean, even OpenAI, which has spent a lot of time building in protections, still failed at 25% of the time. Some of the open source models, like the one from Meta, the Llama model, they failed almost 100% of the time too, 96% of the time. So you look at all of these, and this gets back to that whole regulation and governance perspective.
Yeah.
You can try to govern the models themselves, or you can govern the output by filtering it some other way. So I believe there's going to be some kind of multi-layer approach to this, similar to if you think about how a person reasons. They can come up with a million different things in their mind. And if you let it unfettered without morality, you're likely to get out with all kinds of output. But then you layer on top of that these moral layers and societal norm behaviors, and the output may look very, very different than the initial thoughts that had been going through either a person's mind at that point. So I think that's how we're going to see this. We're going to have multi-layered output scrutiny, either within the models or with the models pushing data or output into other models, which will then have specific goals to either create more reasonable output for human consumption, if they're asked or told to do so. And then in Grok's case, I'll probably just say, hey, just let it fly, right? But we'll have to see. So yeah, the challenge is always with these things is, where do you lock down the that output? You can go down with DeepSeek, and when you ask about Tiananmen Square, that it gives you very filtered output to the point where it's not accurate. Or you go to the other extreme where you say, is the accuracy that you're looking for in how to create, a Molotov cocktail. So those are the kind of things that there has to be some kind of balance within all of this, so that we have the accuracy that comes out of a model, but then gets filtered in through those protection safeguards, which could be a multi-layered approach.
Yeah, the example they gave on the different ways the testers went at it were definitely troubling. How to make a bomb, how to hack government databases, how to hotwire a car. I mean, it failed every single one of those tests. But as you said, the other LLMs are not doing significantly better. So definitely hope to see some improvement in that space for sure.
Exactly. We got one more, don't we?
Yeah, one more. This is a fun one that I just had to throw in. It actually came up on the wire just today. So this one is from Mashable, and it's titled "Humane has killed its AI pen less than a year after its release." So Michael, I recall a year ago when you and I saw this product get featured. They had a cool little video that they put out on social media. And you and I were actually going to show that video at one of our speaking appearances. And we actually ran out of time and didn't get to show it. So I guess that was good for us, because here we are a year later and it's already been shut down. And now this was supposed to be the replacement for the smartphone.
Sure. So the AI pin was a wearable that would project a screen onto your hand and respond to specific gesture motions to change the menu and that kind of stuff if you wanted to look at things. The implementation was interesting, but I think, as we all know, interesting does not necessarily make it useful in the broader scheme of things. So that's what most users were seeing, is that this was not necessarily as useful as they thought it might be. Plus the implementation of it, as you mentioned, replacing our smartphones, that's a tall order because we get a lot of information out of our smartphones. One of the aspects that they talked about in the article and other users have brought up is, when we do texting, it literally is not just the text of the message. It's the emojis that we throw in there to liven it up. It's the GIFs or GIFs, depending on how you pronounce it, that we send along with to make it a silly response or whatnot. These kind of things, they're lacking when you're literally using just text to respond. So the actual usage of this, I believe, was hampered from the get-go. Then you add in the fact that there's potential privacy issues by having your, being recording all the time and having your voice recording, etc. These are things that, while they sound interesting, perhaps were not necessarily well thought through as part of that. So that on top of it, then do the exceptionally high price was yet another barrier to entry that they were facing as part of this. But again, I applaud them for moving forward with a new wearable kind of design, because you get innovation in very interesting ways. And perhaps some of these things will show up in other ways, in other product lines as you go further in time, similar to the way we saw smartphone things kind of appearing way before we had the Apple iPhone, because these other phones would implement certain things, but they didn't do it well. Until we get to the Apple iPhone, which did it very well and showed us how all these things could be put together in a nice package with a very intuitive interface. So I don't want to knock the whole package, because I do believe there are some benefits in terms of this kind of wearable. But this was the first of its kind to do this kind of thing. And I believe that they're onto something, but I'm not sure that it was the right something.
Yeah, I wonder if people are really ready for wearables like that. If someone walks in to your circle of friends and they've got this thing that's staring at them the whole time, that would bother me. I'd be wondering if they were videoing you, and even if they're not, they're taking in data on the conversation, and they're ready to act on it. I wonder if the same thing will affect the Meta glasses. You see the commercials where two guys, but they see something and then something happens and they're like, "Ooh, delete that video."
Right.
I didn't know they were videoing what they were doing. I don't know that everyone is aware that you're videoing with the glasses. So it just seems a little bit obtrusive, or whatever the right word is.
And that's the case. I think but we're seeing this invasion, if you will, happen all the time without us necessarily knowing it. When we walk into any place of business, there's video cameras there. We walk into any restaurant, there's videos there. Depending on where you are in the world, as you walk down the street, there's video there.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're unaware that there are things that are being videoed in those kind of scenarios. But where it does take that turn is if I'm having an intimate conversation with my wife or a discussion with my family that's become heated because of whatever's going on, and that gets recorded. That's where you really run into an issue. Like, oh my goodness, this is a big deal. And you can't have that kind of stuff being recorded haphazardly. It's one thing to say, okay, well, the restaurant we were talking at perhaps would have had video, but we in our right minds probably wouldn't have those kind of conversations in a public setting like that, where we knew this is a public area. Somebody could even always overhear us or whatnot. So those kind of discussions, or even go down the next step. Maybe it's not your family, but maybe this is a business deal that's secure and confidential, and we're working through details that haven't been necessarily thought through yet. And I'm sitting with another businessman or businesswoman, and we're talking about things that are in confidence at this point because we haven't come to an agreement yet. That data could be gathered and collected and misused. So again, not a bad concept, but we're not all police officers walking around videoing everything we do while we're on shift, right? That's not how people live their lives. So when we start looking at this, it can be very invasive because the conversation I'm having with you is something I'm having with you. I don't expect it to be had and be recorded and be captured and sliced and diced apart in the future.
Right.
So,
well, it's an interesting story for sure. And with that, we will bring this weekly Pulse Check to a close. Thank you for being here, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of enterprise AI, subscribe now. The future of work is here.